Dame Sarr could be the best international prospect in the 2026 NBA draft. Let's lock in and find out why.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On NBA Draft podcast with no ceilings. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Make sure to download the app today. My name is Albert Gim, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Professor Corey Tulaba, PhD in hoops and pizza study. What is going on with my camera again? This happens when I put my hands up. But anyway, I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Corey Tulaba. Corey, how are you doing? How are your pizzas? Are they as delicious and as crazy as my giant face on the screen right
now? They most certainly are. I've been meaning to get in the lab and bust out the Chick-fil-A pie, Chick-fil-A nuggets, some of the waffle fries, Chick-fil-A sauce. That's going to be my next adventure. Been keeping it simple lately, but the art of the pizza never stops. We call it the deep dish in hoops. So it's always exciting time making your own pizza. And it's a complicated matter because, on Long Island in New York, we have such incredible pizza. But when you have your own oven, sometimes it's just like, you got to do it DIY. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love how, Corey, you're just diversifying your game, man. You're a teacher, you're a scout, you're a pizza maker, a father, a husband. It's unbelievable the things that you can do with very little time. But Corey, we're really proud and happy to be back today. And Corey, we're talking about an extremely exciting and enticing player in Dame Sarr, who's going to be plying his trade at Duke this year. I made the mistake recently of thinking that he was going to be at Illinois, but no, he's going to be at Duke, and he's going to be filling in like a very important role for that team after Cedric Coward decided to say goodbye without ever playing a minute for them and go to the NBA, and with them losing a Zion James. It's going to be very interesting to see the role that Dame Sarr plays for the Duke Blue Devils. And so, Corey, before we get into the offense, let's go into the lab with Professor Tulaba. Talk to us about some of the essentials of Dame Sarr.
All right, so Dame Sarr headed to Duke via Barcelona. Freshman wing? Guard wing, swing wing action there. Measured at 6'7.5", 189 pounds with a 6'11" and 3/4-inch wingspan at the Nike Hoop Summit in April. He will be 20 on draft night, just turns 20 in June. So this is a kid, again, he has pro experience. We did an episode on Omar Mayer earlier in the week who had pro experience. We have another international prospect in our trip around the world who has pro experience playing in the Euro League and such with Dame. So Dame with Barcelona this year played 25 games. Again, just like in our episode with Omer, the stats don't jump off the page. 3.8 points, 0.7 assists to 0.7 turnovers. So 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, 1.2 rebounds, 0.3 steals, 0.2 blocks on 54 45, 46 shooting splits. Now, the three-point attempts, he was 13 to 29. His free throw attempts, he was 11 to 24. But again, these are up and down minutes, so he's not consistently getting in a rhythm. He had a 63.4 effective field goal percentage, 61.9 true shooting percentage. Now, if you go back a little bit, now again, small sample, playing with Barcelona at the Adidas Next Gen tournament, 8 games. This is with, the youth wing of Barca, played with Kasparis Yakachonis, 16.5 points, 4.5 assists, 2.8 turnovers to 1.64. 2.8 turnovers, 1.64 assists turnover ratio, 3.8 rebounds, 1.4 steals, 0.1 blocks on 39, 30, 71 shooting splits. He was 16 to 54 from 3, 32 to 45 from the free throw line. He had a 46.3 effective field goal, 51.5% true shooting. If you look at both of the shooting splits there, obviously, even if you add them together, still a smaller sample size. I think he's going to end up somewhere in the middle. I don't think he has is as good of a shooter as he was last season with Barca, but I don't think he's as poor as he was at the Next Gen tournament. So I think he's going to end up somewhere maybe like 44, 45% from the field, maybe like 33, 34% from three, and maybe somewhere hovering around, the low 70s from the free throw line this season at Duke. But versatile player, a little raw, but I think made some real improvements even when we saw him at the Nike Hoop Summit. I think if you look at the form, and we'll get into, the specifics soon, I'm sure, but seeing his improvements just aesthetically with some of the skills from his film to seeing him in person at the Nike Hoop Summit was impressive to me. So I'm excited to get into the intricacies of his game.
No, absolutely, Corey. It's always impressive to me how you rattle off all these stats the way that you do. So bravo to you.
Well, it's, mostly just reading. I'm impressed by your ad reads, man. I think you do a great job with those. Those are a lot harder, I think.
I'm just reading. But no, but Corey, with Dame, man, I want to say I wasn't negative about him as a player. I was kind of like unsure because, as you mentioned, Corey, he's a very raw player. When you turn on the film, he feels like a young doe learning how to walk. There's some awkwardness to his game. There's a unrefined aspect to his game. And I'm talking about when I was at the Nike Hoop Summit, I walked into the gym that first day going like, okay, I'm not expecting too much type of situation. Throughout the week, I think I kind of held that mentality. I was like, okay, I think he's interesting. I don't know too much about him other than what I've seen in film. I won't kind of overreact. And then the game started, Corey, and he really wanted to win.
He was a beast.
He really, really wanted to win. And I think that we could feel that energy from him. And of course, as we've mentioned in the past, Corey, Coach Marshall Cho and his staff did an incredible job of getting his players to buy in. Mm-hmm. They're there for a week, but the way that they were playing together and for each other felt like they had been playing together for months and years. And that was really impressive to see. And obviously, Coach Cho and his staff deserves the world of credit for that. But with Dame specifically, he played so hard in that game. And I remember both of us walking away just being so impressed by him in a way that I don't think any of us expected to be impressed by. And so, Corey, here we are, and we're going to get into his offense here. And I think offensively, I'm going to try to be positive, but I also have some serious question marks at this point in his development. I always kind of want to throw out that disclaimer because we're not making definitive statements about him as a player either way, right? It's just from what we've seen and where he is right now. I think he's a very raw player, Corey. I think when it comes to his jumper, I think when it goes in, you're like, wow, that's nice. And then when it doesn't, there are a lot of different moving parts and inconsistencies that you need him to tighten up. I thought there were moments with his lower half where he was a little bit inconsistent. Sometimes his knees were knocking. Sometimes his footwork was, not exactly where you want it to be. Just overall inconsistencies with his base, some moving parts overall. I also think, as you mentioned, Corey, playing for Barcelona's A team last season, they weren't very imaginative with how they used him. They kind of threw him in the corner and was like,
for good reason. Like if you look at, it's a murderer's row, that team, correct. Like of just, oh, that guy, I remember that guy. Like, it's, you go down the list of the entire roster, Alex Abrinas, Jabari Parker, like literally the whole roster is like
Hernan
former
Gomez,
Willie Holman, NBA guys. So they have no reason to develop Dame,
right?
Which is part of the reason he ended up at the Nike Hoop Summit, leaving them, during the season. But yeah, like you said, like he spent a lot of time kind of playing
right
in the corner,
right? Just sitting in the corner a lot, just taking whatever limited opportunities he was given there. I feel like when he was playing for Barcelona B, Corey, and you mentioned, right, some of the stuff that he was able to do playing in that next gen tournament, even, I thought he showed more there. And obviously the numbers tell you that story. He
Yeah.
scored more, did more stuff, whatever. But even like the 4 assists that he averaged, I thought some of the passing stuff with him was more interesting there when they put the ball in his hands and they let him create a little bit next to Yakushonis. Obviously, he's not a guy that I think projects to ever be like a lead guard type. But if you listen to his story and how he grew up, he was a guy that grew up playing a lot of point guard and then had like a growth spurt. So there are some real guard skills in his toolbox that I think
and quickly,
yeah.
Albert, I just sorry to interrupt.
No.
When we walked in you talk about walking in the gym, kind of lowish expectations, or I thought he was like 6'5", 6'6", like that's what I kind of thought he was on film. And then you see him in person, you were like, oh, he's gigantic, like he's very tall. And then he measures at nearly 6'8". And that shifted things for me too, from a perspective, because it's like, oh, here is like a guy who was like, okay, he's got good like point guard size if he's a point guard, but like if he can't really shoot or whatever, and like then he's not as interesting, even though he's a little taller.
Right.
But now he's like 6'8", and he's like got some interesting ball skills, and he's a wing, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I have to adjust the way I view him. And how raw he is, because now I think that those skills are a little bit more intriguing than I initially thought coming in.
No, absolutely. And so Corey, if you can, I think overall little unrefined, but there are interesting aspects to his offensive game. Corey, give us your breakdown of what you saw from him on offense.
Well, first, we talk about him being in the corner. I think the shot, it was not pretty with Barcelona, but I truly believe he made some functional leaps in his form by the time we saw him at the Nike Hoop Summit, where it looked a lot cleaner. Like at Barcelona, it was a little like launch paddy, like,
slingshot.
Yeah. And he was almost like leaning back a little bit with his upper body. And like a lot of that feels like it was fleshed out a little bit. So, the shot, I don't think he's going to be like a really good shooter next year, but I think like, I think there's a trajectory that's going upwards where at least it looks better. He confidently knocked down some shots at the Hoop Summit game, and having him operate in the corner as that spot up shooter with Barcelona. One of the things that I thought he did really well is that he really was good at moving off the ball and finding gaps in the defense to cut either along the baseline or even, other spots of the floor where he was able to create opportunities for himself when he could. And I think that showed up in his efficiency, with Barcelona last year, even if it was on limited attempts. But what he's got to show in, like the Next Gen tournament and then at the Nike Hoop Summit, he has some real creativity as a ball handler. And like I think the handle can get a little loose. It's not like completely on a string, but like he's got some real like wiggle and, some real shake, and he plays at a pretty smooth pace that I think he's going to fit right in the college game. Like it's not because of his experience, like it won't feel fast to him, and he's going to be able to utilize some of that stuff. And I was really impressed by his movement, his ability to attack. He's got really long strides that he uses. So like, he's not like Cam Whitmore as an athlete, but like he's a good vertical athlete, but like he doesn't play super fast, even though he's like a gazelle in the open court, so like in the open court, yeah, obviously he's like able to get down the court quick, but like in the half court, like he's able to like kind of play at the pace where he goes slow, and then he can use those long strides to get to where he wants to go. He can kind of get to Euros and such. Really interesting. The playmaking, I don't think it's as nuanced as Omar Mayer, who we covered earlier in the week, where he's like manipulative, but he's a really good reactive. And like when we say connective passer, like he's like a really, really good connective passer. He's a good decision maker. That's reflected in his stats for Barcelona. And I think that, he's just a really interesting ball of clay who he's got all these interesting tools in his toolkit. And it's just like, is he going to be able to put it together to figure it out? And going to Duke and playing with such high field guys in that system, it's like a really cool opportunity to see him on a big stage alongside these guys. And I forgot about the Cedric Howard thing that you mentioned earlier. And it's like, I forgot that he was going to be kind of the initial guy in that role. And now I think Dame is going to be able to be that kind of Swiss Army knife for Duke because of all these really interesting offensive tools.
No, absolutely, Corey. And I think, overall, even with like the boozers coming in and Hamenia and even their returners, I think he's going to have a very distinct opportunity to show a very versatile and layered game on both ends of the floor. Like offensively, as we mentioned, if he ever gets the ball in his hands, like I think he'll be able to show some stuff. And then we're about to get into his defense, right? And I think he's going to have a lot to offer there as well. But before we get into his defense, we're going to take a really quick break and we'll see you guys on the other side. When I first found out about Skims and that they were making underwear for men, I was pretty intrigued. Heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so had to give it a try. But let me tell you, from what we're hearing and what we're seeing, it lives up to the hype. If you've ever had issues with your underwear when it comes to fit or comfort or just finding the right style, Skims is going to change all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with a perfect balance of comfort and style. I've never tried Skims yet, but I've heard great things about their boxer brief, and people are hooked on it. If you live an active lifestyle, they move with you, they never lose their shape, and they stay in place all day long. So whether you're running errands or you're at the gym or you're living an active life, Skims has your back and is ready for you with their lightweight material. They say it feels like you're wearing absolutely nothing. So if you're ready to shop some Skims for men, go to skims.com and let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show, Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings, in the drop-down menu that follows. Check out Skims today. Had to navigate that one, but we're back and we're talking about Dame Sarr and
well, Albert,
defense.
after all these years, the audience has always wondered what you look like in your underwear. So,
oh man, I'm a versatile podcaster.
That's right.
Where I'm at. Today we're going to get into his defense. Dame Sarr, the defender, and Corey, this is the side of the ball where still, I think he still needs some refinement.
Okay.
But there were certain aspects here where it was like, maybe you're a little bit more refined on this end, but overall, just like there's a skill set and baseline foundation that's really good with him because of the type of build that he has and the length that he has, and then also like the aggression that he can play with on this side of the ball. And so some of the things that I want to highlight, Corey, before I send it to you to kind of get us into this part, I like that he's got really quick hands to go with the good wingspan that he has. I think that's really important. I think he has a willingness to really defend on this side of the ball. He's willing to pick up full court and try to get aggressive and to kind of show the ball handler that he's there. Sorry. I thought at times he could get, I'm going to put it, well, maybe this, at times I felt like he would get obliterated on screens. And that's something that I think he definitely has to work on.
Yeah, I have the word obliterated on screens. Yeah. Yeah.
He's got to work on it.
In my notes.
That's funny. But overall, I feel like he can be a real terror for ball handlers. I think the way that he can get low in his stance, and then with the long arms and his ability to flip his hips and with the quick hands, like just overall, it's good. But then one last kind of area of improvement, or maybe it's like a combo here. There are times when, like on film, you can see where he gets tired and then he's kind of choosing to not be in a stance anymore. And he's kind of hunched over and trusting his length rather than moving his feet and staying active with his lower body. Those are some moments where I was like, okay, that's something we're going to have to clean up. And then, as he builds his stamina and gets stronger, which is another thing, right? I felt like his upper body strength could use some more strength. However, even at the Hoop Summit, you could see that he's growing. The kid is like growing, and like I can't wait to see what he looks like when he's on the floor for Duke, because physically he might take another jump. Trying to find, that's pretty much it for me. Like I felt like the overarching themes with him as a defender. Corey, let's get into it with you. What were some of the nitty-gritty things that you saw with him as a defender?
Well, I think he plays a really good motor on that end, and like he will guard you the length of the floor. Like as soon as that ball's inbounded, like he's in his stance and he has such good lateral mobility, and then like paired with his length that like it's really hard to kind of just like blow by him. He will beat you to the spot, and under pressure, he gets a lot of pokeaways. And, I think that like that's really interesting. And we saw that not only like in the film, and like he was doing that for Barca, but we saw that like at the Nike Hoop Summit. And, I remember specifically one of the possessions in the scrimmage against the Portland Generals. I forgot who was bringing up the ball for that team, but he was guarding up the floor, picked a pocket. He got a layup. I think he did it a second time, and he ended up hitting like a three off a kick out off the strip. And I was like, okay, like this kid likes to guard, right? Like you said, sometimes he gets obliterated. He's playing like real professional teams with real strong NBA dudes. So yeah, there are times where he gets hit and he needs to fight through. That's 100% like for sure. But I do think sometimes he can get like a lot of times he can get slithery because he is that kind of like build where he'll slither around, and even though he's like 6'8", like he can get around the screen and kind of rear contest or get back into the play. So I think that's interesting. I thought that like he did a pretty good job like being in the right spot and handling his responsibility as an off-ball guy, to where like even doing something as simple as like tagging, from the weak side of the floor is something you'd see him do. And then he would go and find a body when a shot would go up and box out. So like he does like some of the little things. Ultimately, I think he has all of the tools to be an absolute monster defensively. Like, I think he can be really, really, really good. And because he has those tools defensively, that I think, yes, he needs to get stronger and all of that. Like, obviously he's, a young kid. He will get stronger, but the tools that he has and what he does with them, I think is really cool. And, you pair that kind of player and you put him next to a Cam Boozer and like, I think that's going to be a really fun kind of like front court 3-4 tandem for Duke defensively. And because he's tall and long, like, even though he's a little weak, like he's going to be able to get good contests and like handle switches, I think. So, sure, centers, you get him on the block, they're going to put him under the rim. But as far as like guarding on the perimeter and stuff, I think he's going to be good, and he's competitive too. He plays hard. And, we saw that, when he was at the Hoop Summit repping Italy for Team World. So I'm a big fan of him on this end.
I'm like foreshadowing here. He might get into like a couple like physical altercations during the season. And I think like, and I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that he's such an aggressive defender that will make ball handlers so uncomfortable that I think there are going to be some moments where like ball handlers will like get angry, maybe like throw an elbow or like push him, and then he's getting in their face and they kind of go back and forth because he's a competitor. He's a real competitor. He likes being a pest. As we mentioned, great length, good lateral mobility, quick hands, all that combines into him being really pesky on the ball. And so I could see him, if he, ends up guarding some of these like 1A, number one options on some of these teams, causing them a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Causing them to pick the ball up early, right? Causing them to get sped up, causing them to get annoyed and just angry at him. I could see some of that happening. And so with that in mind, I think he's a really interesting defensive player. And Corey, like with his skill set, his length, his everything, I think it all kind of comes together with him being a bit of a problem here on the defensive end of the ball. And I'm really excited to see Coach Shire and Duke ends up utilizing him this year and what he can end up being for them. And so with that in mind, with his kind of raw offensive skill, but also really exciting defensive skill as well, Corey, I think there are a lot of guys that come to mind, and we'll get into those comps right after this break. The NFL season is here. We're in week 4, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Right now, new customers, you can bet, if you just bet $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is an incredible experience. Easy to use interface, has everything that you're looking for. You can put together a parlay bet. Maybe this week you want to go Matthew Golden, anytime touchdown. Maybe you go Jahmyr Gibbs, anytime touchdown. You add in, what's one of the most consistent bets in all of football every week right now? Jalen Hurts, right? Anytime touchdown. Something like that. You put them all together. You turn on the game. it turns out to just be a more exciting experience, right? And so if you're ready to play, make sure to download the FanDuel app now by visiting fanduel.com to get started. That's fanduel.com to place your first $5 bet today. All right, Corey, it's time for us to kind of, this is where we shine.
This is
right?
it.
We're
Our
getting
favorite
into
part of the
comps.
show.
Favorite part of the show. We like to wrap with this. We think we're good at it, and you guys hopefully agree. But we're going to get into some comps. Corey, I think Dame Sarr and finding comps for him was not the easiest for me because as you mentioned before, he is kind of a ball of clay. We don't really know what his final form is going to look like and the type of player that he might become. Will he be a point forward? Will he be a 3-and-D wing? Will he grow to be a number one option someday offensively? Who knows, right? There's so many different outcomes that can come with his game. But wanted to hear from you first, Corey. What were some comps for Dame Sarr?
Okay, so he's got so many interesting skills and tools on both sides of the ball that when I say these names, it's more of like if you added each one and you did a chemistry experiment and you're like adding the elements of these guys, and instead of saying it's strictly one for one, because the first guy that I'm going to bring up is like a really great shooter, and that's not Dame Sarr, but I think that he moves very similarly and that he shares some other offensive and defensive tools, and that's Mikal Bridges. And I think kind of the measurements, the height, the slenderness, the slenderness is a theme within, my player comps. So that was kind of the first guy that I was like, okay, I see some of that. I see a little bit of Jalen Williams, J-Dub. J-Dub, much tighter handle. I think maybe a better, more advanced playmaker, but some of that two-way ability as kind of like an on-ball guy who is also going to be able to play off the ball and do his thing off the ball, but when he gets the ball can kind of create himself a little bit too. Herb Jones as a guy who made plays, was athletic, was a defense-first guy, and couldn't really shoot in college, but in the league has developed his jumper to a point where now like, okay, like Herb's going to shoot it. Yeah, he's respectable. He's not going to be a 3-point contest guy, but he's going to be a guy that like, if you leave him open, he's going to hit shots at an above average clip. Right. And then finally, and this is more of like a low end guy within this group of guys, because if you hear those names, you're like, okay, so this guy's incredible. DB Hooper, Delano Banton, who tall, kind of like point guard, can get a little funky and loose with his handle, but is like totally grab and go option, kind of like point guard-esque, can play with the ball in his hands, not really going to be an outside shooter. But this is a guy who, after he was drafted, he played 2 years in college, one and sat a year in between the 2 years that he played. Once he got to the league, he's 4-year NBA player now who's in the league, and, kind of an interesting kind of toolsy guy that is, I think, going to keep getting chances because of those tools. So those were kind of like the 4 guys where it's like I see little bits and pieces of each guy. And if you added them up and you did a science experiment, like that's the prospect chemistry for me.
That's a good one, Corey. Your mix of guys makes a lot of sense to me. And once again, like I feel like it's hard to pick like one guy because he's such a ball of clay. We really don't know. There's so many different outcomes that can come, that he could become. One guy for me, this is like pie in the sky. Like everything's got to go right. He's really got to bulk up, but I think it's possible because I think he's already bulking up a little bit. I put OG Anunoby. This is like, I'm not saying he's OG. I'm saying if everything goes right,
he goes and sees LeBron's guy in South Beach and
bingo. Yeah. Could happen. This is a weird one, and I hate it. And I absolutely hate it. But it's still, I don't know why. Like, this is a player that I always enjoyed. When the Knicks got him, I was really excited. I think I was the only Knicks fan that was excited about it when we got him. A guy that I thought was a little bit ahead of his time, like a bigger forward who was like terrible on offense, but was like really intriguing on defense because he could guard anybody. And then he could like oddly handle the ball a little bit. as I'm saying it, I still hate it, but I want to throw it in there anyway as like the lowest comps possible. Like a Jared Jeffries.
Oh, he had some moments with the Knicks.
Corey, I personally was always a big fan because I felt like his game was so weird, and his game being weird, I felt like was such a luxury to the Knicks where they could ask him to do so many things. And like, of course, he never learned to shoot the ball,
No.
but like maybe in the modern NBA, there would have been a bigger focus and emphasis on that. Maybe he would have grown up taking more shots or
He was
whatever.
competitive.
But very competitive and just defensively could do anything you asked him to do. Like I always loved that aspect of his game. And there was like a beautiful versatility on both ends. So could pass the ball as well, was nice as a screener. But just if he played today, I think his game would have looked a lot different. And that versatility would have been accentuated more. So those are my two comps. The Jared Jeffries one, I get it, guys, is a weird one, but just a guy that came to my mind as I was watching Dame Sarr as like the lowest end comp possible. But overall, guys, a really interesting prospect. And don't forget, the Locked On NBA Top 100 is here, voted on by the NBA hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Our Top 100 was formed by experts that cover these teams and players every day. You can find the full list on Locked On Sports today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, guys, thanks for joining us about Dame Sarr from Duke. My name's Albert. He's Corey. Talk to you guys soon.